The desert wind carried a cruel song that evening, its whistle slipping between the cracks of dunes like whispers from another world. A circle of villagers stood at the edge of the barren stretch, their eyes fixed on the young woman kneeling in the sand. Her arms had already been bound behind her back, her hair tangled and heavy with dust, yet her face was strangely calm, as though she knew a truth that no one else could bear. The sentence had been passed quickly, without compassion. They called it justice, though in their hearts it was fear and envy dressed in righteousness. To them she was dangerous, too beautiful, too pure, too different. Lies had been spoken, that she consorted with spirits, that her touch soured milk, that her presence cursed the fields. Each rumor built upon the last until her fate was sealed with a council's nod. They pressed her down and shoveled sand against her body, grain by grain, until only her head remained above the shifting earth. The heat of the day still radiated from the ground, searing her skin. The sand clung to her lips, filling her nostrils, pressing into her neck with a weight that promised to grow heavier as the night cooled and tightened its hold. She did not struggle, though her chest rose and fell with the strain of shallow breaths. Among the onlookers there were some who looked away in shame, others who smirked with satisfaction. One pair of eyes, however, lingered on her necklace, a simple silver chain with a pendant carved in the shape of a seed. It caught the fading sunlight, flashing defiantly against the cruelty of the act. It was said to have belonged to her late mother, a talisman of protection. Even now, half buried in sand, she wore it like a crown. When the last spadeful of sand was thrown, the elders spoke the words of dismissal. They turned their backs on her, leaving her to the silence of the desert. The villagers followed reluctantly, their voices rising in uneasy conversation. Some muttered that the earth itself would judge her, others said the wild dogs would finish what they had begun. But no one doubted she would be gone by morning. Night fell deep and heavy. The stars spread across the sky like watchful eyes. She lifted her chin, whispering into the vast emptiness, words no one else could hear. The wind seemed to listen, carrying her voice across the dunes. When the villagers returned at dawn, the sand lay untouched, smooth as though no body had ever been buried there. Only the necklace remained on the surface, its silver pendant gleaming in the rising sun. There was no sign of her body, no hint of struggle, no footprints leading away. Just the necklace waiting in silence, a relic of a girl swallowed whole or perhaps reborn. The villagers froze, breath caught in their throats. Whispers spread like fire, the earth had taken her. Or worse, returned her somewhere they could not follow. Before she became the whisper on every villager's lips, before her name was spoken only in fear, she was simply a daughter. Gentle, diligent, and kind, she moved through the world with a grace that was not learned but born into her. From the moment she could walk, she carried a quiet presence that drew both people and creatures alike. Children followed her, laughing as she sang to them. Stray dogs curled at her feet, as though they sensed in her a warmth the world often lacked. Her mother had been the heart of her childhood, a woman whose laughter rang like bells through the village and whose necklace, the silver chain with its seed-shaped pendant, never left her throat. When illness took her mother too soon, the necklace was passed down. The little girl would hold it against her chest at night, pressing the cool metal into her skin as though it might bring her mother's heartbeat back. Over the years it became not just an ornament, but a symbol of her resilience, the only inheritance that mattered. Her father remarried swiftly after his first wife's death. Though she tried to welcome her stepmother with kindness, she soon learned that kindness was often seen as weakness. Her stepmother's gaze lingered on the necklace with thinly veiled hunger, and her smiles carried the sharpness of knives. Yet the girl remained steadfast, never answering cruelty with cruelty, never letting bitterness taint her. As she grew older, her beauty ripened in a way that made villagers pause when she passed. It was not just the symmetry of her features or the brightness of her eyes, but the way her spirit seemed to shine through her very skin. When she worked in the fields, bent under the sun, she did so without complaint, her laughter carrying even through sweat and dirt. When she fetched water from the well, children crowded around her, eager to hear a story, and she never turned them away. Even the elders, stiff and proud in their age, admitted she had the kind of presence that was rare, a girl meant for something greater. But admiration breeds envy as quickly as love. Whispers began in corners of the marketplace, that no one could be so perfect, that her beauty was unnatural, that she must be favored by forces unseen. A jar of milk spoiled too soon, and someone muttered that she had passed by the cow that morning. A child fell ill, and another swore they had seen the girl lingering by the house at dusk. Small suspicions festered like weeds, watered by jealousy until they became vines choking truth itself. Through it all she kept her composure. She rose early each morning, braided her hair with care, and tied her mother's necklace firmly at her throat as though it were a shield. She swept the yard, fed the chickens, and worked beside her stepmother in the fields without complaint. Yet when she walked back to the village in the evening she felt eyes burning into her back. Some still smiled warmly, others turned away, their mouths tight with words unspoken. There was one person whose hatred grew faster than all others, her stepsister. Where the younger girl was graceful, the elder was clumsy. Where the girl's words were sweet, the sister's tone was sharp. Suitors lingered near the well when the younger appeared, but avoided the elder with polite excuses. Their father's pride, once focused on the elder child, shifted quietly toward the younger, and though he never spoke it aloud, everyone could see where his heart leaned. The stepmother noticed too. Each smile directed toward the girl was like a blade in her ribs. Each compliment felt like salt in a wound that refused to heal. At night, she whispered poison into her husband's ear, convincing him that his daughter was strange, perhaps dangerous, and that her necklace was not an heirloom but a charm of dark origins. Slowly, suspicion began to spread from whispers in corners to loud voices in the square. Still the girl endured. She smiled when others frowned, she helped when others cursed, and she kept the necklace against her chest like a promise. To the children and the animals she was still the girl with a gentle laugh. To the jealous she was a threat that had to be silenced. And to the earth, though no one yet understood, she was something more, a seed waiting for the day it would break through soil, unburned and unbroken. Envy does not appear in storms. It begins as a drizzle, a sideways glance, a muttered word, a small hesitation in trust. But once allowed to linger, it thickens into thunder until at last it consumes. By the time the girl turned 18, the drizzle had become a flood. The stepmother's whispers were no longer confined to her husband's ears. She sowed them like seeds among the women at the well, the men in the market, even the elders who governed disputes. "Have you not seen how no illness touches her?" she would ask. "Do you not find it strange that her beauty grows brighter while others fade? And that necklace she clutches, do you not wonder what it truly is?" The villagers, already uneasy with anything beyond their understanding, began to nod. Each time misfortune struck, however small, they looked to the girl. If a child fell and scraped a knee, someone muttered her name. If a harvest turned out poorer than expected, someone remembered seeing her in the fields. She was still kind, still diligent, but her goodness now worked against her. How could anyone be so flawless unless it was a mask for something dark? Her father wavered. Once he had held her on his shoulders as they walked the fields, once he had said she reminded him of her late mother in every way that mattered. But now, under the constant drip of poison, his pride curdled into doubt. He found himself avoiding her eyes, flinching when she smiled as though her warmth might burn him. His heart knew she was innocent, but his mind, weakened by whispers, told him otherwise. It was her stepsister, however, who became the sharpest thorn. Each time the girl's beauty was praised, the elder daughter's rage grew. Suitors who once courted her now carried gifts to the younger instead. Mothers who once praised her hands now asked for the younger's help with weaving. Every glance was a reminder of what she lacked. Her jealousy turned inward until it soured her very spirit, and she vowed that if the necklace would not hang from her own throat, then it would hang from no one's. The stepmother seized on this bitterness. "You deserve better," she whispered to her daughter at night. "Why should she take all that belongs to you? Why should her shadow eclipse your light?" The words were oil and the stepsister's envy was flame. Together, they burned with a hunger that could only be satisfied through destruction. The plan began innocently enough, or so it was made to appear. A test, they called it, for the good of the village. If the girl was truly pure, the earth would not harm her. If she was cursed, the earth itself would reveal the truth. The elders, already uneasy with her presence, agreed. No one spoke against it, for who dares to defend what others already suspect? On a day when the sun blazed mercilessly, the villagers gathered by the dunes. The air shimmered with heat, and the sand stretched endless, shifting like a restless beast. The girl was brought forward, her hands trembling but her chin held high. Her necklace caught the light, flashing like a single star in the vast desert. Her father avoided her gaze. Her stepmother wore triumph thinly veiled as sorrow. Her stepsister stood at the front, lips curved in a smile that pretended to be pity. The ritual was simple. They dug a hollow in the sand and pressed her into it. First her legs, then her waist, then her chest, each handful of sand poured over her like a verdict. She did not fight, though fear welled in her throat. She did not scream, though her heart pounded like a drum. She simply pressed her lips together and whispered her mother's name, feeling the cool weight of the necklace against her collarbone. By the time the sand reached her neck, the sun was a burning eye above. The villagers looked down at her, some with suspicion, some with pity, some with indifference. Her stepmother declared, "If she is pure, the earth will release her. If not, the earth will take her back." The crowd dispersed, leaving her buried, her face exposed, her necklace glinting like a final prayer. The heat pressed down, her lips cracked, and her vision blurred. She listened to the hiss of the wind shifting the dunes and wondered if this was how all her mother's love would end, swallowed in silence. But the earth had been listening. The sand that smothered her body began to tremble, subtle at first, then stronger. Somewhere beneath, unseen, something ancient stirred, recognizing not a curse but a daughter, not a danger but a seed. When the villagers returned at dusk, they expected to find her lifeless, a husk the earth had claimed. Instead, the sand lay smooth, undisturbed, as if no body had ever been buried there. Only one thing remained, her necklace gleaming faintly under the fading light, resting on the surface like a promise left behind. The stepmother gasped. The stepsister staggered back. Her father fell to his knees, clutching at the air as though he could call her back. But the earth had already taken her, not as punishment but as inheritance. And in the silence that followed, the first cracks of fear split the villagers' certainty. For if the necklace remained, then perhaps she had not perished at all. Perhaps she had only transformed. The villagers saw only the necklace, gleaming faintly upon the sand. But beneath, where no human eye could peer, an ancient realm stirred awake. The girl, breath shallow and heart trembling, felt the weight of sand pressing in all around her. She should have suffocated, but instead the grains seemed to shift, loosening, cradling her rather than crushing. Warmth spread across her skin, not the burning heat of the desert sun but a steady pulse, like a heartbeat deep in the earth. At first she thought she was dying, that this was the last kindness of her mother's spirit. But then she realized she was sinking, slowly, gently, as though the sand itself had decided to swallow her whole. Down she slipped, through layers of grit and stone, until all sound from above was gone. She did not struggle. Her body should have panicked, but instead, calm washed over her. The necklace at her throat grew heavier, its jewel glowing faintly in the darkness. She clutched it, whispering, "Mother," and the name seemed to echo not against rock but in the very marrow of the earth. The descent ended in a cavern unlike any she had imagined. It was vast, lit by veins of glowing minerals that pulsed like rivers of fire. Strange plants sprouted from cracks, their leaves shimmering with silver and green. Water trickled somewhere unseen, filling the chamber with a low song. It was a place alive, a womb of the earth itself. And waiting for her were figures. They rose from the stone as if the rock itself had given birth to them. Women with braided hair threaded with roots, men with eyes dark as obsidian, elders cloaked in dust that shifted like smoke. Their voices did not speak, yet she heard them clearly inside her chest, inside her bones. Daughter of sorrow. Daughter of sand. You were buried to die, but you were planted instead. Her knees buckled and she fell, pressing her palms into the living ground. Tears streamed down her face. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why save me when even my own family cast me aside?" The voices answered as one, "Because you carry what they feared. The necklace you bear is not mere stone, but a seed of inheritance. Your mother's blood, your ancestors' breath, flows through it. The earth knows its own children." She touched the necklace, which now glowed steadily, the jewel pulsing in time with her heartbeat. It was no longer just a token of memory, it was a key binding her to this realm. The spirit stepped closer. One, an elder woman with skin like weathered clay, bent down and lifted a strand of the girl's hair. "They saw your beauty as a threat, your kindness as a mask. But we see it as truth. You are not their burden. You are our heir." At these words the cavern shifted. The glowing minerals brightened, and the plants bent toward her as if drawn by her presence. She felt the ground beneath her feet hum with recognition. Something within her unfurled, not power in the way mortals craved, but belonging. For the first time in her life she was not out of place. Yet acceptance came with revelation. Visions struck her like lightning, flashes of what the earth remembered. She saw women buried before her, women accused, silenced, erased. Some perished, their bones cradled in roots. Others, like her, were chosen, taken deeper, made guardians rather than victims. Their necklaces glowed in her vision, scattered across centuries, each one a seed planted into the soil of memory. When the visions faded, she gasped, clutching her chest. "You mean? I am not the first. Nor will you be the last. the voices answered. But you will be the one they cannot forget. You will rise not as a ghost but as a queen. The word queen rang through her like thunder. She thought of her stepmother's cold sneer, her stepsister's jealous eyes, her father's turned back. She thought of the villagers who watched and did nothing. And she thought of the necklace they now clutched in fear above the sands, wondering if it was all that remained of her. She stood slowly, her body lighter than it had ever felt. The sand that had once chained her now obeyed her will. When she lifted her hand, grains rose in swirls, dancing in the cavern's light. She pressed her bare feet into the soil, and sprouts broke through cracks, tender and green. Her voice, when it came, was not meek but steady. If they feared me before, what will they do when I return? The spirit's reply was both warning and promise. The earth crowns its queen, but it does not shield her from choice. You may forgive or you may avenge. What you carry now is not curse nor gift but power. And power wears the face of the one who wields it. The girl lifted her chin, her tears drying. For the first time she did not feel like a victim, nor even a daughter abandoned. She felt vast, endless, rooted. The desert had not buried her. The desert had claimed her. And when she would rise again, it would not be as a girl wronged, but as something the world had never seen. The sun burned high over the desert the next day, but the pit where they had left her was quiet. The villagers came, dragging their feet, some in shame, some in cruel anticipation. They expected to see a withered body, eyes rolled back in death, lips cracked from thirst. But instead there was only sand. The pit lay smooth as though no one had ever been buried there. Only a single object remained, half buried in the golden grains, her necklace. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A boy darted forward, intending to snatch it, but as his fingers touched the jewel, he yelped and recoiled, a blister already forming on his skin. The necklace glowed faintly, warm and untouchable, as though the desert itself guarded it. Whispers spread quickly. She vanished. No, the earth swallowed her. The spirits took her. No one survives the sand. Her stepmother stood at the edge, her lips pale, eyes darting. She had expected triumph, to return and gloat over a corpse. Instead, unease gnawed at her. The girl's stepsister clutched her arm, whispering, "Mother, where is she?" But the woman shook her off, her jaw tightening. "She is gone. That is all that matters," she said sharply. But her voice cracked, betraying her fear. The father stood farther back, his hands trembling. He had agreed to the burial, had turned his face from his daughter's pleas. Now, staring at the empty pit, he could not banish the sound of her voice calling "Father," as they left her behind. His heart, already heavy with guilt, sank like a stone. The villagers shifted uneasily. Some crossed themselves in the old way, calling upon the ancestors for protection. Others murmured that perhaps she had been innocent, that perhaps the trial had been wrong. But few dared say it too loudly for fear the stepmother's wrath would turn on them next. That night the whispers deepened. Children claimed they heard bells of wind near the pit, though no one had hung chimes there. A shepherd swore he saw a figure in white walk across the dunes at twilight, her hair flowing like river water. He told his wife, who told her sister, and by dawn the tale had grown. Now she was a glowing spirit, crowned in sand and fire, her necklace blazing like a second sun. The stepmother scoffed at such stories, but she could not sleep. In her dreams she heard the scrape of shifting sand, the sound of footsteps circling her bed. When she woke, her sheets clung damp to her skin. The stepsister fared worse. One night as she went to the well, she thought she heard laughter behind her. When she spun around, the yard was empty, yet in the dust at her feet there were footprints. Bare, delicate, unmistakably hers. She dropped the bucket and ran, heart hammering, her mind whispering, "She has returned." Even the father was haunted. He began to wander at night, standing on the ridge above the burial pit, staring at the empty sand. Once he swore he saw green sprouts where no plant had ever grown, curling like fingers from the dune. He tried to tell the others, but the words caught in his throat. He feared what they would think, feared what they had done. The village itself changed. Goats refused to graze near the burial ground. The wind carried strange scents, wet earth in a place that had not seen rain in months. And always there was the necklace. No matter how many times it was taken, hidden, or thrown away, it returned by morning to lie at the edge of the pit, gleaming faintly, waiting. By the third week no one would go near it. The villagers muttered that she had become one of the earth's chosen, that she had been planted rather than buried. Some whispered the word queen in hushed voices, afraid that speaking it too loudly would summon her. The stepmother tried to silence such talk, threatening punishment for anyone who spread tales. But fear worked against her. The more she denied it, the stronger the whispers grew. Her power, once unquestioned, now trembled like a reed in the wind. And then came the first omen. At dusk, the sky turned strange. Clouds the color of blood rolled across the desert, though no storm followed. The wind howled, carrying with it the faint sound of a woman's laughter, not cruel, not mocking, but strong, defiant. The villagers froze where they stood, their eyes wide. "She is not dead," someone whispered. "She is coming back," another said, trembling. The stepmother shouted for silence, but her voice broke. For the first time, the villagers looked at her not with respect or fear, but with suspicion. They began to wonder, if the girl had not perished, if the spirits themselves had chosen her, what did that make the ones who had ordered her death? The pit remained empty. But in the silence of the desert nights, the whispers grew louder. And soon they would no longer be whispers at all. The desert did not take her as the villagers believed. It did not choke her, nor crush her breath away. Instead, when the last of the footsteps faded and darkness spread across the dunes, the sand shifted and sighed as though alive. She had whispered to it, not in words but in spirit. Her tears soaked the grains, her heartbeat echoed into the earth. And the earth listened. At first, she felt the crushing weight, her chest rising in shallow, panicked gasps. But then the pressure loosened. The grains around her body began to cool, as though the desert itself had drawn the heat away. Roots slithered through the earth, coiling around her wrists and ankles, but not to bind her, to lift her, to hold her as one of its own. She felt them pulse with life, feeding strength into her weary bones. Her necklace, pressed against her throat, grew warm. The silver seed-shaped pendant glowed faintly, and in its glow she saw visions. Women before her, ancestors whose names she had never been told, all walking barefoot on burning sand, all carrying burdens heavier than stone. They spoke without mouths, their voices like wind. "The earth does not punish you, child. It crowns you." She closed her eyes, surrendering. The terror drained from her, replaced with a deep, resonant calm. For the first time she did not feel like a victim. She felt like soil, like stone, like something vast and unyielding. Night after night the earth remade her. The villagers who dared to pass near the pit whispered of strange lights glowing beneath the sand, faint green and silver sparks that pulsed like a heartbeat. Some claimed to hear her singing, low and steady, though no breath should have remained in her chest. And then, one moonless night, the sand cracked open. She rose slowly, her skin no longer dulled by dust but shimmering as though polished by the desert winds themselves. Strands of her hair glittered with grains of silver sand, each one glowing faintly. Her eyes were darker, deeper. Not the eyes of a helpless girl, but of someone who had seen into the earth's secrets and returned. The necklace no longer looked like a trinket. The seed-shaped pendant pulsed with green light, roots faintly etched into the silver as though it had grown new veins while buried beneath the ground. It no longer hung passively, it rested against her chest like a seal of power, as though the desert itself had marked her. When she stepped barefoot onto the dunes, the sand did not shift away but rose beneath her feet, shaping into firm ground with every step. Tiny green shoots pushed through the barren earth where she walked. Desert millet, wild herbs, stubborn plants that had never thrived in such dry land. The desert was answering her presence, breaking its own laws to honor her. She wandered into the wilderness first, testing her new body, her new bond. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but when she placed her hand against a brittle bush, it bloomed into life, its thorns softening into leaves she could eat. Thirst cracked her lips, but when she pressed her palm to the sand, water seeped up, clear and cold. Her reflection in that water startled her. She still saw the outline of the girl she had been, gentle eyes, a face too young for the cruelty she had endured. But layered over it was something more. Dignity, fierceness, the bearing of someone no longer bound to others' judgments. She touched her cheek and whispered to herself, "The earth did not bury me. It crowned me." From that moment she was no longer only a daughter cast aside. She was the earth's heir. But the desert did not free her only to live in solitude. Each night, as she rested on the dunes, the whispers returned, voices of ancestors carried by the wind. They told her that her story was not finished. The injustice done to her could not be left buried. The people who had condemned her must face what they had wrought. She listened, her heart both heavy and resolute. She did not crave vengeance for its own sake. What she craved was truth, laid bare before those who had mocked her tears. If she returned to the village, she would not return as the broken girl they buried. She would return as something they could not ignore. And so she waited. The desert tested her still, with scorching days and frigid nights, but with each trial she grew stronger. Her skin bronzed, her body lean with strength, her spirit steady. She was no longer fragile. On the seventh night, as the moon rose full and round, she stood atop the highest dune and looked back toward the village lights in the distance. They flickered faintly like timid stars. Her necklace glowed, pulsing in rhythm with her heart. The earth's whispers swelled around her. Go. Show them what they buried. Show them what they made. She smiled, not cruelly, but with the quiet assurance of someone who had risen from a grave and found herself remade into something unbreakable. Barefoot, crowned with the desert's light, she began the long walk back to the village. The village was still waking when the first whispers began. At dawn, a shepherd swore he saw a lone figure walking across the dunes, her silhouette outlined by the rising sun. At first he thought it was a mirage, the desert was cruel with tricks. But then he saw the glint of something silver against her chest, and he dropped his staff, stumbling back toward the village with terror in his throat. By the time the figure reached the outer fields, word had spread. Men dropped their tools, women clutched their children, and elders muttered prayers. The impossible was happening. The girl they had buried in sand was walking toward them, whole and alive. She entered the village barefoot, her steps firm, the ground strangely firm beneath her feet. Where her toes touched, the dust seemed to soften, tiny shoots of green sprouting in her wake. Her hair flowed behind her like a banner, strands glimmering with grains of desert silver. Her eyes, once soft and hesitant, now carried a depth that made even the boldest villager lower his gaze. At her throat gleamed the necklace, not dull but radiant, the seed-shaped pendant glowing faintly as though alive. Each time it caught the light, the villagers felt a shiver crawl up their spines, as if the earth itself was staring back at them. They fell silent as she walked through the market square. Some gasped, others whispered, "Ghost." But when she looked at them, there was no mistaking it. She was flesh and blood, though changed, as though the desert had remade her in its own image. Children, braver than their parents, stepped closer. One little girl reached out and touched the hem of her tattered dress. Instead of fear, she smiled, and where the child's fingers brushed her fabric, a tiny wildflower bloomed through the cracks in the earth. The crowd gasped. "She is blessed," an elder whispered. "No," another muttered, trembling. "She is chosen." At the edge of the square, her stepmother froze. She had been waiting for this moment with dread ever since the necklace was found in the sand. Now, seeing her alive, radiant, untouchable, the woman's face turned pale. She grabbed her daughter's arm, whispering fiercely, "Don't look at her. Don't speak to her. She is not what she was." But her hands shook, betraying her terror. The stepsister, pale and trembling, whispered back, "Mother, we buried her. We buried her. How can she walk?" "She cannot," the stepmother hissed. "She should not." Yet even as she said it, she stepped backward, her eyes darting like a cornered animal. The girl finally stopped in the center of the square. The villagers had gathered around, though none dared come too close. She let the silence hang heavy, her eyes scanning every face. Those who had mocked her, those who had stayed silent, even those who had wept but still turned away. And then her gaze fell upon her father. He stood near the council house, his head bowed, his face drawn in shame. His lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. When her eyes met his, he trembled visibly, the weight of his betrayal pressing down on him like a millstone. She said nothing. She only looked at him. And in that silence, every villager understood more than any speech could have told them. The whispers grew louder around her. Is she alive? Is she sent by the ancestors? Did the earth crown her? Each rumor twisted into awe, into fear, into reverence. The villagers dropped to their knees one by one, not commanded, not asked, but compelled by something greater than themselves. Only the stepmother remained standing, clutching her daughter, her eyes wide with hatred and fear. The girl finally spoke, her voice low but steady, carrying across the square. "You buried me." The words were simple, but they struck like thunder. The villagers bowed their heads, shamed, unable to meet her gaze. "But the earth did not keep me," she continued, her eyes shifting toward her stepmother. "It lifted me, crowned me, and now I have returned." The stepmother flinched as though struck. She opened her mouth to retort, but no words came. Her lips quivered, her throat dry. All she could do was glare, her fingernails digging into her daughter's arm until the girl whimpered. The earth's air looked upon them all, not with vengeance, but with something heavier, the weight of truth. Her presence was enough. No curse, no threat, no scream was needed. The miracle of her survival, the growth of green beneath her feet, the glow of the necklace, all testified against those who had wronged her. And though the villagers bowed, though her father wept, though her enemies shook with fear, she did not smile. She simply stood, tall and unyielding, her shadow stretching long across the square, as if the desert itself had entered the village with her. The council summoned a gathering that very night. The village square was lit with torches, their flames swaying in the dry wind, throwing uneasy shadows across the faces of the people. Everyone came, farmers, shepherds, children clinging to their mothers' skirts. They did not come out of duty, but because none could ignore the truth walking among them. At the center of it all, she stood barefoot on the packed earth, her necklace glowing faintly in the firelight. Her presence demanded silence, though she had not spoken since the morning. The villagers shifted nervously, stealing glances at her and at one another, waiting for someone else to break the air heavy with dread. At last, the chief elder cleared his throat. His voice, usually steady, trembled. "Daughter, you were buried. We all saw it. Yet you stand before us now. Tell us," he swallowed, his eyes flicking toward the stepmother, "tell us what has happened." She lifted her chin, her gaze sweeping across the crowd. "You buried me because of lies." The words rang sharp, undeniable. Murmurs spread instantly, guilt and fear tugging at every heart. Some of the younger men stared at the ground, ashamed. Old women clutched their beads, whispering prayers. Children peered up, wide-eyed, at the woman who had defied the desert. Her father, sitting on the council's left, bowed his head, unable to look at her. His silence was louder than any confession. The stepmother, however, rose quickly, her voice hard. "Lies? No. You are no daughter of this village anymore. You are a spirit, a curse walking in flesh. How else can you explain your return?" The villagers gasped, some nodding nervously, others shaking their heads. Fear clashed with awe in their eyes. The girl stepped closer, and as she did, the ground beneath her feet shivered. Tiny green shoots pressed through the hard-packed earth, curling upward into the torchlight. The crowd fell silent. "I returned because the earth chose to lift me," she said calmly. "The desert gave me back. Not as your victim. Not as your burden. But as its heir." Gasps swept through the square. The stepmother's face blanched. She tried to speak again, but her words faltered. Her lips quivered, her breath came ragged. "She lies," the woman cried at last, pointing a shaking finger. "She tricks you. Spirits deceive through beauty. She should be cast out." The villagers stirred uneasily, but none moved against the girl. Instead, their eyes turned toward the stepmother, searching her face, weighing her trembling voice against the calm strength of the one they had condemned. The girl's voice deepened. "If I am cursed, then why does the earth answer me?" She lifted her hand, and a breeze stirred the torches, carrying the faint scent of rain, impossible in the dry season. A ripple of awe passed through the crowd. Her father finally lifted his head, tears streaking his cheeks. "I buried you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I let them put you in the ground. I was weak." His sobs carried across the gathering, shaking him to his core. The crowd looked at him with a mix of pity and condemnation. The stepmother pulled him by the arm, hissing, "Silence. Do not listen to her." But the people had already made their choice. One by one voices rose in the crowd. "We saw her necklace in the sand. We heard the whispers in the wind. The desert gave her back. She speaks the truth." The chief elder raised his staff, silencing them. He looked long at the stepmother, then at the girl, then at the trembling father. His voice was grave. "This village wronged you. We listened to fear instead of reason. If you live, if you walk among us, then it is the judgment of the ancestors, not ours. Tonight we must face that truth." The stepmother paled, her eyes darting wildly. She opened her mouth to argue, but the words caught in her throat. She saw it in their faces, the doubt, the suspicion, the realization that her lies had led them to bury an innocent girl alive. The girl said nothing more. She didn't need to. Her silence was heavier than accusation, her calm gaze sharper than any blade. She simply stood, tall and unbroken, while the weight of her truth crushed her enemies without a single hand raised. The torches flickered. The crowd trembled. The reckoning had begun. The night deepened and the torches burned lower, but no one dared leave the village square. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, heavy with expectation. Above, the moon hung swollen and red, veiled by drifting clouds. The elders whispered that it was a sign, an omen long spoken of in ancestral songs. The girl stood at the center, her necklace glowing faintly as though catching light from an unseen fire. The villagers formed a wide circle around her, their faces pale with unease. Everyone felt it, The ancestors had gathered, unseen but present, their judgment stirring in the wind. The chief elder raised his staff again. His voice cracked but carried across the square. The ancestors will decide this night. If we were blind, they will open our eyes. If we were guilty, they will strip away our lies. At his words, a sudden gust of wind tore through the square. The torches sputtered wildly, shadows leaping across the huts. The sand on the ground swirled into small spirals, dancing around the girl's bare feet. A murmur rose from the crowd as people clutched their cloaks tighter, children burying their faces into their mothers' sides. Then came the sound, low at first like a distant drumbeat beneath the earth. Thump, thump, thump. The villagers froze, listening. It grew louder, steady, like the heartbeat of the desert itself. The girl's necklace pulsed in rhythm, each throb of light timed with the deep sound. The stepmother screamed. This is witchcraft. She calls upon darkness to deceive you. She tried to run from the square, but the wind rose sharply, whipping her garments, driving her back. The crowd gasped, for the sand itself seemed to rise against her, pulling her feet heavy into the earth. The girl lifted her chin, her voice calm and strong. I do not summon them. They come because justice calls. As if in answer, the clouds above parted, revealing the blood-red moon in full. A thin veil of mist rolled across the ground, cool and damp in the dry season. From within the mist came whispers, indistinct at first, then clearer, layered voices of men and women, old and long gone. You buried her in silence. You fed fear with lies. You turned your backs on truth. The voices swirled around the crowd, some falling to their knees, others covering their ears in terror. The guilty shifted uneasily, the stepmother clutching at her chest, her eyes wild. Not me, she cried. It was not me alone. The council agreed, her father? The whispers grew louder, drowning her words. The girl stood unflinching as the mist coiled around her ankles like vines. Her necklace flared bright, and the villagers could see faint figures in the mist, ancestors shimmering and solemn, their eyes fixed on the accused. The father collapsed to the ground, sobbing. Forgive me. Forgive my weakness. I let them take her, I did not stop it. I buried my own blood. Ancestors, punish me if you must. The voices shifted, softer for a moment. He speaks truth of his shame. Then silence fell. But when the villagers turned to the stepmother, the mist thickened around her. The whispers hissed like fire. Lies. Greed. Malice. The torches flared high, then bent toward her as if pulled by invisible hands. She shrieked, her face twisted with desperation. No. It was her beauty that cursed us. Her goodness that mocked me. I only wanted what should have been mine. Her words rang across the square, shattering any illusion. The villagers gasped, confession laid bare not by force but by her own tongue. The ancestors' voices rose in unison, a roar of wind and flame. The ground beneath the stepmother cracked, and from it sprouted thorned vines, curling upward around her legs. She screamed, struggling, but the more she fought, the tighter they bound her. The villagers backed away in horror, crossing their chests, whispering prayers. The girl did not move. She only watched, her expression sorrowful yet resolute. This was not her doing. It was judgment, ancient and unyielding. The vines tightened, pulling the stepmother to her knees. The whispers filled the air one final time. The guilty will carry their shame beyond the grave. Then the torches extinguished, plunging the square into darkness. When the flames sputtered back to life, the vines had receded into the earth. The stepmother lay limp upon the sand, her eyes empty, her voice silenced forever. The villagers trembled. Some wept. Others bowed deeply before the girl. The chief elder lowered his staff and whispered, The ancestors have spoken. We were blind. But through you they have opened our eyes. The girl turned slowly, her necklace gleaming in the torchlight. Their judgment is not only for her. It is for all of you. You buried me. You turned away. Remember this night, for the earth does not forget. The wind stilled and the mist faded. But the weight of judgment lingered, pressing into every heart. The ancestors had passed their verdict, and none who witnessed it would ever be the same. The dawn crept slowly over the horizon, its first rays spilling across the desert like molten gold. The village stirred in uneasy silence, for no rooster crowed, no laughter of children carried on the air. Instead, all eyes were drawn to the figure walking at the edge of the dunes, the girl who had once been condemned, now reborn in the embrace of the earth itself. Her necklace glimmered faintly in the morning light, no longer the fragile trinket of a young maiden but a sigil of power, as though it carried the pulse of the land within it. Around her feet, something wondrous stirred. With each step she took, tender green shoots burst from the sand, millet, grass, flowers unknown to the desert. The earth, once harsh and unyielding, answered her presence like a loyal servant greeting its queen. The villagers gathered, whispering. Some clutched their chest in awe, others hung back, afraid of what she had become. But none could look away. A child broke from the crowd first, a small boy barefoot, eyes wide with wonder. He ran to her and touched the fresh shoots beneath her feet, giggling as he pulled at the soft blades of grass. She brings life, he cried, holding up a fistful of green. The desert loves her. His innocent voice broke the silence and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Elders dropped to their knees, bowing deeply, while mothers clutched their children, whispering that they must never forget this sight. The girl paused, watching them, her expression calm yet unreadable. She raised her voice, and though soft, it carried across the sand. You buried me as an outcast, a curse upon your house. You thought the earth would take me as punishment. But the earth did not devour me, it crowned me. Her words cut like wind through stone. Villagers lowered their heads, shame pressing them down. Some wept openly, remembering how they had stood by, silent, when she was dragged to her trial. The chief elder stepped forward, trembling. Daughter of the earth, forgive us. We were blind, swayed by lies and envy. The ancestors have punished the guilty. We beg you, do not forsake us. For a long moment she was silent. The wind tugged gently at her hair, and the necklace pulsed like a heartbeat against her chest. She looked down at the green path that spread in her wake, then back to the people who had once betrayed her. I will not live in bitterness, she said at last. But neither will I allow you to forget. Every step I take is a reminder of your cruelty, and of the resilience that rose from it. You may call me queen, you may bow before me, but know this, I walk not for your honor. I walk for the earth, and for those whose voices you tried to silence. The words struck them deeper than any curse. The villagers knelt lower, heads pressed to the sand. Yet the girl did not linger. She turned from them, her gaze set on the wide horizon where the desert met the sky. As she walked, the sprouts followed her, unfurling in waves of green. The barren land softened beneath her, trails of millet bending toward the light. Children followed at a distance, laughing as they danced upon the sudden fields, while the elders watched in stunned reverence. The farther she went, the stronger the miracle grew. Flowers burst from cracks in stone, tiny rivers formed in the sand, and the air itself seemed to cool. It was as though she carried the memory of life wherever she moved, her steps rewriting the story of the land. The villagers began to whisper a new name, Queen of the Green Path. But the girl did not look back. She did not need their praise nor their apologies. The earth itself had chosen her, and that was enough. By the time the sun fully rose, she was a figure on the horizon, her path a winding trail of blossoms and millet, shimmering like emerald fire across the desert floor. The final image remained etched into the hearts of all who watched. A woman once buried alive, now walking tall with her head high, the earth bowing at her feet. The necklace upon her chest gleamed like dawn itself, and the whispers of the ancestors followed her steps. Where betrayal had tried to destroy her, resilience had made her eternal. And so the legend was born. Every patch of green that appeared in the desert was said to be where she had once walked, a reminder that justice may be buried but never broken, for the earth always remembers.